back to ThinkView, and this is NK. At the moment right now, I'm using a laptop with 32 gigs of memories, and right after booting into Windows, the system already takes up to around 6 to 8 GB of memories, even when I haven't opened any app at all. And when I switch to another laptop with around 16 GB of memories, well, surprisingly, the system uses less RAM, just around 4 to 6 GB of memories. And with an 8 GB RAM laptop, it only uses around 2 to 3 GB. The interesting part is that in all three cases, the laptop still runs just fine without any lag or stuttering. So that makes me wonder, how does Windows manage the memories? Why is RAM usage different depending on how much RAM you have? And is 32 gigs of RAM really overkill? And who might find it helpful? I will explain all of it in today's videos. Now, let's get started. Now, going back to the earlier example, you might wondering, why does Windows use more memories the more memories you have? Why don't they leave it idle? Some people even worry that their laptop is running something in the background because they haven't done anything yet and Windows already uses 7 to 8 gigs of memories. In reality, Windows is designed to not leave the memories idle. More specifically, it's a technology that they call SuperFetch. With this technology, it improves performance by preloading things before you actually need them, such as frequently used apps or recently opened files. And thanks to the preloading, the system now feels faster and more responsive. Well, I think basically this is a performance upgrade for free, because otherwise your unused RAM would be left wasted. And you don't have to be worried because the things that got preloaded will be automatically cleared when the RAM actually needs for some things. For example, if your Windows has preloaded around 8 gigs of data, and then you open a very memory-intensive application like AI software or like Adobe Premiere for video editing, the Windows will immediately clear that preloaded data to make room for the app that you're using. And the amount of memories used for preloading will also scale with the amount of RAM that you actually have. So if your laptop has a lot of memories, well then Windows will simply use it to improve responsiveness. Now all of that explanation leads to one key question. Who actually needs 32 gigs of RAM? Well, the first group would be the multitaskers. If you constantly open multiple Office apps, several browsers, and dozens of tabs at the same time, well then more RAM is always better. That's why many business laptops on the market like the ThinkPads are often go with 32 gigs of RAM option, and people still buy them in large number. Technically speaking, you can still do a lot of things with 16 gigs of RAM. But the system responsiveness will not be there at the same as 32 gigs of RAM because there is less space for the preloaded data. And if you're a hardcore multitasker, even 16 gigs of RAM might not be enough to run all of your apps smoothly. So if you're multitasking a lot and also want an instant system responsive, well then 32 gigs of RAM is absolutely worth it. Well, the more RAM you have, the better. No need to worry about wasting money here. The second group that truly need 32 gigs of RAM is users who want to run AI locally, directly on their machine. In fact, for these use cases, 32 gigs of RAM are just the beginning. Even 64 or 128 gigs of memory still feel very limiting because the more RAM you have, the better AI model you can run. For example, in LM Studio, AI models are loaded directly into memories. I often use GPT-OSS with 20 billion parameter models, and when I load it, it takes up almost the entire 32 gigs of RAM. It still consumes at least 12 to 13 gigs of memories continuously. And in this situation, if your laptop only have like 16 GB of memories, well then I will guarantee it will freeze instantly when you load the model. So in these cases, the more RAM you have, the better. The third group of users are video editor. 10 bits of color with a lot of effect and color grading, well then you definitely need 32 gigs of RAM at least. Alright, that's everything I want to share in today's videos. Unfortunately, at the time of making this video, well, the RAM price are very high and still rising. And bad news is that we might again see laptop with just 8 gigs of RAM flooding the market next year. So if you can still find RAM at good price, well then grab a bunch of them, because 16 or 32 gigs of RAM in 2025 are still more than enough. And what is your thought on this matter? How do you use your memories? Let me know in the comment section down below, okay? Now thanks for watching. This is NK from ThinkView, and see you guys next time.